In the autumn of 1888, London was a city on edge. Queen Victoria reigned, and the British Empire stretched across the globe, but beneath the veneer of imperial grandeur lay a simmering pot of social unrest. Poverty, overcrowding, and a stark divide between the wealthy West End and the impoverished East End created an atmosphere of tension and despair. Nowhere was this more palpable than in Whitechapel, a district teeming with the working class, immigrants, and those struggling to survive on the fringes of society. Imagine the scene: gas lamps casting pools of flickering light on cobblestone, streets, the air thick with coal smoke and the stench of uncollected refuse, narrow alleyways snaking between dilapidated buildings, offering little respite from the chill of the approaching winter. Thousands crammed into overcrowded lodging houses, their dreams as cramped as their living quarters. It was a breeding ground for desperation, and in this environment, a new terror was about to be unleashed. The residents of Whitechapel were already battling against immense odds. Many were employed in grueling and dangerous industries, earning meager wages that barely covered the cost of survival. Others turned to petty crime or prostitution as a last resort. Disease was rampant, infant mortality rates were shockingly high, and the workhouses offered little more than a slow death for those who couldn't fend for themselves. The police, often understaffed and ill-equipped, struggled to maintain order in this chaotic landscape. Then, the murders began. The first victim, Mary Ann Nichols, was discovered on August 31, 1888, in Bucks Row. Her throat had been slashed, and her abdomen brutally mutilated. The brutality of the attack sent shockwaves through Whitechapel, but at first it was dismissed as just another instance of violence in a district accustomed to hardship. However, just a week later, the body of Annie Chapman was found in Hanbury Street, her injuries even more gruesome. A pattern was emerging, a chilling realization that a predator was stalking the streets of Whitechapel. Fear gripped the community. Women who had no choice but to work the streets after dark found themselves living in constant terror. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The police, under immense pressure from the public and the press, launched a massive investigation, but the killer remained elusive, a phantom lurking in the shadows. The situation escalated further on. September 30th, the night that became known as Double Event. Elizabeth Stride was found dead on Berner Street, her throat cut but her body otherwise unmarked, leading some to believe the killer had been interrupted. Just an hour later, however, the body of Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square, her murder even more savage and disturbing than the previous ones. The killer's depravity seemed to be escalating with each attack, pushing the boundaries of human comprehension. The press seized upon the story, sensationalizing the details and fueling the growing hysteria. Headlines screamed of the Whitechapel murderer, the leather apron, and eventually, Jack the Ripper. The name, supposedly taken from a letter sent to the Central News Agency, captured the public's imagination and transformed the killer into a legendary figure of horror. Whether the letter was genuine or a hoax, the name stuck, becoming synonymous with the terror that gripped London. Panic spread beyond Whitechapel, reaching the wealthier districts of the city. The crimes exposed the stark social inequalities of Victorian London, highlighting the plight of the poor and the indifference of the elite. Demands for justice grew louder, but the police seemed no closer to catching the killer. Suspects were questioned, theories were proposed, but the investigation remained mired in confusion and dead ends. Then, as suddenly as it began, the killing spree stopped. After the murder of Mary Jane Kelly on November 9, 1888, the Ripper vanished, leaving behind a legacy of fear and unanswered questions. The case became a cold case, a haunting reminder of a dark chapter in London's history. Now, fast forward to the 21st century. Over 100 years have passed, and the world has changed beyond recognition. Forensic science has advanced exponentially, and technology has revolutionized the way crimes are investigated. Could modern tools finally shed light on the Ripper, mystery, Enter artificial intelligence. In an era where AI is being used to solve complex problems in medicine, finance, and engineering, could it also be applied to a century-old cold case? Could AI analyze the vast amounts of data surrounding the Ripper murders, police reports, witness statements, forensic evidence, and historical records to identify patterns and connections that have been missed by human investigators? The idea is both intriguing and controversial. Some argue that it's disrespectful to use AI to dissect the tragedy of the Ripper murders, that it reduces human suffering to mere data points. Others believe that it's a legitimate avenue for investigation, a way to potentially bring closure to a case that has haunted generations. But the question remains, can AI truly solve the Ripper mystery? Can it overcome the limitations of the available evidence, the biases of historical records, and the inherent uncertainties of a crime committed so long ago? And perhaps more importantly, should we even try? What are the ethical implications of using AI to unmask a killer who has been dead for over a century? The answers, as we are about to discover, are far more complex and unsettling than anyone could have imagined. London's autumn of fear, it seems, is far from over. The cold case is about to ignite in the era of AI. In 2007, a dark, floral-patterned shawl claimed to have once belonged to Catherine Eddowes, one of Jack the Ripper's 5 canonical victims, resurfaced. Purchased at auction by businessman and Ripper enthusiast Russell Edwards, this wasn't just an old piece of fabric. It was potentially a time capsule holding answers to a century-old mystery. The shawl, reportedly discovered near Eddowes' body, bore faint stains that ignited the imagination. For years, dismissed as a mere curiosity, Edwards believed science could succeed where others had failed. Lab tests revealed traces of both blood and semen on the fabric. Using cutting-edge forensic techniques, genetic material was extracted and compared to living descendants of both Catherine Eddowes and Aaron Kosminski, the Polish barber long suspected, by Scotland Yard. By 2014, initial results appeared groundbreaking. Analysts claimed the DNA on the shawl matched the maternal line of Kosminski. This was hailed as scientific confirmation, transforming whispers of guilt into tangible evidence. Media headlines screamed, "Case solved." The shadow of the Whitechapel murders finally had a name. But the triumph was fleeting. Doubts arose almost instantly. Critics questioned the shawl's provenance, its uncertain history, its questionable preservation, and the high likelihood of contamination over so many years. The findings, they argued, hadn't undergone the rigorous peer review process required for solid science. Some even accused analysts of overstating the DNA evidence. The debate was fierce. Between 2014 and 2019, further work was published in academic journals, seemingly bolstering the claim that Kosminski's genetic profile was present on the shawl. Yet skepticism persisted. Experts in forensic methodology emphasized how easily errors could infiltrate samples over a century old. Others pointed to the possibility of multiple contributors, suggesting the results were being misinterpreted. The shawl remained a symbol of both promise and controversy, stuck between scientific validation and historical doubt. The case, once again, seemed destined to remain an unsolved enigma, an unclosed wound in criminal history. That is, until 2025, when a technological leap changed everything. Artificial intelligence, newly refined for forensic science, was unleashed on the mystery. This wasn't about analyzing one piece of evidence in isolation. This new system was designed to weave together strands of data across centuries. For the first time, Catherine Eddowes' shawl wasn't studied alone. The AI platform integrated DNA analysis from the shawl with eyewitness testimony, asylum records, newspaper archives, and even behavioral patterns derived from crime scene reconstructions. It wasn't a single test, but a network of correlations, a mosaic constructed from fragments scattered throughout London's historical archives. The results were startling. The AI confirmed what earlier tests had suggested. The genetic profile on the shawl aligned strongly with Aaron Kosminski's maternal DNA. The connection between the barber of Whitechapel and one of the Ripper's victims appeared undeniable when viewed through this broad, multi-layered framework. But the true revelation lay in the inconsistencies. As the AI sifted through the data, it identified subtle differences in the attack patterns. Some crimes displayed a ritualistic precision, almost surgical in nature, while others bore the marks of chaotic violence. Testimonies from witnesses, often dismissed as unreliable, began to reveal patterns when reanalyzed. Descriptions of suspects varied not only in detail but also in build, clothing, and demeanor. The chilling conclusion was that the murders, long believed to be the work of a single individual, may have been committed by more than one person. Jack the Ripper, the singular phantom who terrorized London, could have been a myth shaped by overlapping killers whose crimes blurred together in the fog of fear. This revelation reshaped the entire case. If Kosminski's DNA tied him to the crime scene, he may have been responsible for some of the murders, but the AI suggested he wasn't alone. The notion of a single, calculating assassin gave way to a darker possibility. Whitechapel's terror wasn't the act of one monster, but a storm of violence fueled by the desperation, poverty, and brutality of 1888 London. Forensic historians revisited asylum reports. Kosminski had been described in Scotland Yard, memos as unstable and violent, with a known hatred of women. His confinement to an asylum after the murders aligned with the sudden cessation of the crimes. Yet, the AI pinpointed moments where the timing didn't perfectly match, instances where another hand could have continued the slaughter while Kosminski was incapacitated. The story of the shawl, once thought to be a final answer, now symbolized complexity. What science initially seemed to solve, artificial intelligence revealed as layered and intertwined. Instead of closure, the breakthrough deepened the mystery. Still, there was progress. AI didn't deliver a definitive confession from beyond the grave, but it reshaped our understanding. By blending DNA, witness accounts, and historical context, it created the clearest picture yet of London's autumn of fear. The face of Kosminski emerged strongly, but behind him loomed shadows, perhaps of others who vanished without a trace. For the families of the victims, it was a bittersweet revelation. Catherine Eddowes, Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, and Mary Jane Kelly had long been reduced to footnotes in the Ripper's story. Now, AI was giving them a fuller, albeit more complex narrative. But could that provide real closure, or simply more questions? More than one Ripper. Ethics, truth, and the cost of unmasking a legend. Begin new section. The world of Jack the Ripper has always been a murky one, shrouded in speculation, riddled with red herrings, and, perhaps most frustratingly, lacking definitive answers. For over a century, countless theories have been proposed, debated, and often discarded. But now, as we stand at the intersection of cutting-edge technology and historical analysis, we find ourselves confronted with a truly unsettling question. What if everything we thought we knew about Jack the Ripper was wrong? Specifically, what if Jack the Ripper wasn't just one man? The AI analysis we've discussed throws a major wrench into the established narrative. By cross-referencing crime scene details, witness accounts, geographical data, and even the supposed DNA evidence from the shawl, the AI flagged inconsistencies, subtle but significant variations in the Ripper's methods, the victims selected, and even the descriptions provided by those who claimed to have seen him. Think about it. Some killings were characterized by a disturbingly precise anatomical knowledge, suggesting a killer with surgical training. Others were far more brutal, almost frenzied, lacking that same calculated precision. Could one man have possessed such wildly different approaches? And if so, why? The AI's suggestion that there may have been multiple perpetrators, each operating independently, perhaps even inspired or emboldened by the initial crimes, forces us to reevaluate the entire Ripper narrative. We're no longer talking about a single identifiable boogeyman stalking the streets of Whitechapel. We're talking about a social ecosystem where brutal violence against women was normalized, where societal indifference allowed killers to thrive in the shadows. This raises profound ethical questions. For over a century, the name Jack the Ripper has been synonymous with singular, unparalleled evil. It's a brand, almost, a label applied to a specific type of monstrous depravity. Attributing the crimes to multiple individuals, while potentially more accurate, risks diluting that concentrated horror. Does it minimize the suffering of the victims? Does it lessen the impact of the crimes by spreading the blame? Consider the families of the victims. For generations, they've lived with the knowledge that their loved ones were brutally murdered by a single identifiable killer, a phantom that justice seemingly could never touch. Now, imagine being told that the killer wasn't one man, but potentially several. Does that bring closure, or does it simply scatter the anger and grief, making it even harder to find a focus for their pain? Conversely, what about Aaron Kosminski? The DNA evidence, however contested, continues to point towards his involvement in at least one of the killings. If the AI is correct, and there were multiple Rippers, could Kosminski have been one of them, but not the Ripper? Does that distinction even matter? Does it exonerate him in any way, or does it simply make him a player in a larger, even more disturbing drama? The ethical tightrope we walk here is incredibly thin. On one hand, we have a responsibility to pursue the truth wherever it may lead, even if it challenges our long-held assumptions. On the other hand, we have a moral obligation to respect the victims and their families, to avoid sensationalizing their suffering, and to ensure that our pursuit of knowledge doesn't come at the cost of their dignity. Furthermore, unmasking. A legend comes with its own set of costs. The Jack the Ripper story has become deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness. It's inspired countless books, films, and television shows. It's fueled tourism in London, drawing visitors from around the world who are eager to walk the same streets that the Ripper once stalked. What happens when we dismantle that legend? What happens when we replace the single terrifying figure with a more complex and perhaps less palatable reality? Do we risk losing something valuable? Not the crimes themselves, but the collective fascination that has forced us to confront the darker aspects of human nature? Does the mystery itself, the unanswered questions that have haunted us for so long, serve a purpose? Perhaps the enduring power of the Ripper story lies not in the answers, but in the questions it compels us to ask. Questions about violence against women, about social inequality, about the nature of evil itself. By attempting to definitively solve the case, do we risk losing the very thing that makes it so compelling? Ultimately, there are no easy answers. The ethical considerations are complex and multifaceted. But one thing is clear. As we delve deeper into the mystery of Jack the Ripper, we must proceed with caution, with respect, and with a clear understanding of the potential consequences of our actions. The truth, as always, is a double-edged sword. It can enlighten and empower, but it can also wound and destroy. The choice is ours. Do we wield that sword responsibly, or do we risk unleashing its destructive power? End section.